My house has a detached garage, and out of the garage is a long driveway with a basketball hoop right next to it. I also want to add that you can't see past the middle of the driveway from in the house. So, when I was about 6 years old, my brother, who was 9 at the time, was shooting hoops, and I'm just kind of watching him and just wandering around. I'm standing toward the end of the driveway about 10 feet away from the road. A very stereotypical white pedo van with the windows blacked out then pulls up to the end of the driveway, and a bald man rolls down the window. My brother didn't see what was going on because he's pretty distracted shooting hoops and I'm out of his peripheral. This man then asks if I would like some candy, and me not having the stranger danger talk yet, I say yes and start walking towards his van. My brother now noticed the car pulled up and then turns and sees me walking towards it. He sprints down the driveway, grabs my hand, and tells me to run inside. We both start running down the driveway and then go into the garage. We close the garage door and run inside. We tell my mom immediately, and she runs outside to get the plate number. As she got outside, the guy had already closed the door and starts speeding off. My brother and I didn't even know how he got out of the car, which makes the door closing even scarier. At the time, I didn't really get what was wrong, but I did get the stranger danger talk right after that. I'm still very grateful for my brother to this day, because if not for him, I could have possibly been kidnapped. Very scary experience looking back, and I'm really glad nothing happened. I'm a 5'3" girl living in New York City and working a night job. I usually end up getting off work at around 3 a.m., and there aren't many people getting off at my train stop. But the train rides have a decent amount of people. Lately, within the last 4 or 5 months, I've seen a larger amount of people hanging around the streets in my neighborhood, and I've been coming home at this time for about a year now. There's more and more reports of missing people in New York City, so naturally, my parents are pretty worried about my safety. Usually when I'm a few stops away on the train, I'll call my dad and he'll meet me on the corner of my block. When I get off the train, I have to walk down a block and turn the corner to walk a little bit more before I get to my house. So, one night as I'm coming from the platform, I then see a man across the street a few feet away from the curb from where I was headed. I was very wary of him, but at this time I'm pretty wary of everyone, so I decided to keep my eyes on him. The light then changed, signaling my turn to walk, so I cross the street and this man hasn't moved from this little area yet. He's moving around but looking like he has no real destination. So the moment I pass him, I then notice from the corner of my eyes that he's now headed right towards me at full speed. I got nervous because my dad hadn't turned the corner yet, so I started walking pretty fast, fearing the worst while he's still following in my direction. Finally, when I begin to reach the middle, I see my dad turn and I make it a big point to wave with my whole arm. So if the man behind me was aiming to get me, he at least knew I would be with someone else. I continued to keep my pace, however, just in case he was still trying. I finally reach my dad and we turn the corner together. Once we reach my gate, I then turned around and I noticed that the man wasn't wearing a jacket during the winter, and he might have been homeless. He started walking back the same way he came. That's when I realized that if my dad hadn't have been there, I might have gotten robbed or even worse. I also want to add that I'm not trying to say that all homeless people are threatening or trying to rob you, but I just got a really weird vibe from when I first saw him. My intuitions and judgments haven't failed me yet, so I'm really glad I listened to them. Just down the road from where a few years ago I had previously lived in Southeast Australia is the opening into about 100 acres of woodlands and bush that I frequently went into when I was younger to do the usual things, riding, camping, etc. I was out driving at around 11:30 p.m. with my girlfriend, and as we were in the area, decided to show her the woodlands while we were in the area, as she loves everything to do with nature, and it was also summer, so it was an extremely warm night. I left my car with the light shining into the trees, as we weren't going too far in and it was pitch black inside. The two of us just kind of sat there just chatting, having a smoke, and generally relaxing. She was sitting on sort of a map of the area that had been put in a plastic bag, and I was keeping an eye on the trees as I had a weird feeling that something was just wrong. I've read on here a few people that have said that they have felt like they were in danger, although nothing around them was off, and I had this same feeling. Every sense was almost reaching out, and my adrenaline was sky high, but there wasn't really anything in my eyeline that seemed any different. After lighting another cigarette to calm my nerves, I scanned the tree line once more and realized that it looked different than before. It was only after starting into the dark that I saw that there was now moonlight lighting up the grass where it wasn't before, and there was now a black shape now blocking it that before I thought was a tree. I've got goosebumps just typing this. The only way to describe it was that literally all of the sound just ceased and everything went dead silent, and a few seconds later, this disgusting feeling of dread fell over me. I then saw motion in the dark of the path as this thing started crawling towards us. It was on all fours. I've seen nearly every animal in the outback here, and we don't have any large predators like this in the United States or Europe. But somehow I just knew this thing was a predator, and it wasn't hiding itself from us, but just slowly crawling towards us. I'm not really sure if my girlfriend saw it or not, as I couldn't look away. But just as it reached the line that my car lights were able to illuminate, it then reared up onto two legs and just started staring at us. Now, I'm 6'4", and this thing was about another meter larger than me, with arms that were far too long that nearly reached down near the ground. All I could make out of it was an off-white, almost yellowish fur on it, and in the dim light, all I could really make out was the silhouette of his head. The only way I can describe what it looked like is it kind of reminded me of a dog or a wolf. I wasn't able to move as it stared at me, but it was at this point that my girlfriend then gasped, which seemed to break off whatever was stopping me from thinking logically. I then grabbed my girlfriend by the arm and then sprinted to my car. I slammed the doors and then tore out of there as fast as I could. Both of us way too scared to speak until about a half an hour later. We've both discussed it many times. The feeling that we had was what I imagine is what a rabbit sees when it catches a wolf or fox looking at it. Just knowing you're its prey. That this is something that would be able to end us with absolute ease if it wanted to. Neither of us have been able to come up with any kind of explanation for what it was, but it's definitely changed the way I view the woods and bush, as well as when I go camping and hiking now. I sometimes think back to that and wonder what it was and if I will ever see anything like that ever again. I just don't know. This happened about 2 to 3 years ago, but I still think about it every now and then when I'm walking alone and no one's around. I was volunteering at a school in a rural area about 3 kilometers from my home. I didn't know how to drive and I have an irrational fear of biking, so I didn't really mind walking home every Wednesday. I was 19 years old at the time, but I know that I looked at least 3 years younger. It was winter, it was cold, and it was raining, and I had no umbrella. It's fine though. I really liked the rain and I was covered from head to toe, so I still enjoyed my peaceful walk with my music blasting through my earphones. But as I was walking, I saw something in my peripheral vision that I was always scared to see in a situation like this. There was a car slowing down, following me. I didn't know what to do. I tried not to assume the worst, and I turned to see whether that was the only car on that road or if there were potential witnesses in case something happened. Nope. Just this one car following me. There was no one else around as far as my eyes could see. Then, the driver lowers his window and I see his face. An old man. Seems to take care of himself, not weak-looking, and his eyes were completely fixed on me. The conversation went as followed.
"Where are you going? Would you like me to take you somewhere?"
I take off my earphones. Huh? I had heard him because at that point I had already turned the music down to be more aware of my surroundings. Plus, despite not wanting to assume the worst, I still wanted to buy some time to think of an out. Where can I run? Can someone hear me if I scream? Can anyone else see us? Where can I get help? Well, there was really no one around and nowhere to run or hide. Now, I was walking in this very rural area on the side of this road that had a field on one side and then woods on the other. There was just one abandoned house up ahead. So I tried to reason with myself. This man is probably just concerned that I'm visibly walking a long distance, right? Oh, no thanks, I'm fine. I really like walking.
"Oh, no, I don't care about that. I just want you to get in the car."
What? Maybe he's concerned because it's raining and I don't have an umbrella. No thanks. I know it's raining, but I like the rain, so I'm alright.
"No, I don't think you get it. I don't care. I just want you to get in the car. Now. I'll drive you wherever you need to go."
For heaven's sake, really? I'm giving this potential kidnapper 2 excuses and he doesn't take them? His intentions are becoming clearer and clearer. I can't ignore this anymore. And he never once breaks eye contact. It's like he's analyzing my every move and reaction. I'm also starting to notice that his smile is starting to become more sinister as well. Is it just my fear tricking me? This whole time I'm trying to look as friendly and as naive as possible because I don't want him to realize that he can't trick me into getting to his car, and his only choice would be to use force. Remember, no one can hear me if I scream.
"Listen, I just want to talk to you. Can I?"
Well, alright, what is it?
No, I mean, I want to talk to you properly. Get in the car. I just want to talk to you.
That's the only moment when he breaks eye contact, and it's to slowly look at me from head to toe.
"Well, you know what? How about I park a little bit further and you can join me to have a chat?"
Sure. I don't know if you'll find a place to park anywhere close, but go ahead if you want, sir. I'm only walking straight anyway.
"Perfect. See you there?"
Yes, sir. He then smiles and drives away. I wait for his car to be far enough so he can't see me, and then I immediately run towards the abandoned house to hide while I then make a call to my mom for her to come get me. The police wouldn't really do anything since I'm not in immediate danger. We've tried to call them once after some serious threats from a stalker, and they just told us to only call them if the stalker was on our property. Anyways, I explain everything to my mom and she tells me to send her a screenshot of Google Maps with my exact location, just in case something happens, and that I need to stay hidden while keeping an eye on the road to see if that man's car appears again. I'm about to end the call when I then see his car drive by yet again. And what do I see? He's looking right at me, as if he already knew exactly where I was hiding. He just starts waving at me with a creepy smile plastered all over his face, and still with this trying very hard to seem friendly vibe. He knows I'm hiding and on a call with someone now. He knows that I wasn't as naive as I pretended to be. Then he just drives away. My mom is still on the phone with me, so I tell her what just happened and she tells me to try and stay calm and just wait for her. We end the call and I wait. Fortunately for me, he doesn't come back. My mom's car finally appears and much faster than I anticipated. I get inside and we go home. I still can't wrap my head around what exactly happened and what could have happened. Sir, whoever you are, no matter what your intentions were, I really hope I don't encounter you again while walking. Please, if you happen to see me again, please do not approach me. I met this girl who we'll call Elle in an online chat room, and I really hit it off with her. She was literally everything I ever wanted in a woman, except for one thing. Elle lived in Portugal, over 3,500 miles away from where I lived in the US. We got pretty close though, despite the distance, and decided we wanted to make a go of it. And so we entered into this long-distance relationship. A few months later, and I got a new paying job, planning to use the extra funds to save up to go and meet Elle in person one day. Instead, however, I met this girl that we'll call Alice at my job. We worked in a factory where you would work on two-person teams on a single machine. The teams would vary, so one day you would be working with person X on machine 4, and the next with person Y on machine 2. I've been with the company for a couple of weeks and got assigned to work with her, and for the most part, we got along pretty fine. We made idle, mundane conversation as we worked, as one does, talking about nothing serious when, out of the blue, she asked me if I was single. I responded that I wasn't and that I'd been dating this girl Elle for a few months, and just left it at that, thinking I'd put the kibosh on whatever she was thinking may happen between us. The conversation went on pretty mundane as ever when she mentioned her boyfriend, and I thought maybe she didn't have any ideas about anything after all, and perhaps she was just being nosy. Our shift ended, and as such, so did the awkward conversation. Over the next little while we worked together again off and on, at one point she asked if she could add me on social media. I told her sure, not really thinking much of it. That is, until the next day at work, when she mentioned some post that she had read on Elle's wall that I hadn't seen or could find. I asked her where she had seen it, and she said it was an older post. The post was from 7 years previous. I asked Alice if she had gone through Elle's entire history, and she said yeah, and that she was bored and had nothing else to do. So after going through mine, she decided to go through Elle's as well. Now, that kind of set off some alarm bells in my head, because who the heck goes through the entire post history of a complete stranger in a single night? I guess my face showed my thoughts, because she quickly apologized and stated that she didn't mean to be so over the top about it, but we post so rarely that she would go through just a few and suddenly find herself looking at years old posts. This wasn't untrue and so seemed pretty reasonable, but still kinda weird, as she had no connection whatsoever to Elle, and so she had no business on her timeline. I mentioned it to Elle later that day and helped adjust her privacy settings so it couldn't happen again. A bit later on then, I was working with Alice again, and the conversation was yet again pretty fairly mundane, when all of a sudden this guy walked over to our machine and then just stood there glaring at us. First just her for a while, then me, then back at her, and etc. etc. After about 20 minutes, there was a call over the intercom and he then sauntered off to answer it. Alice then looked like she was about to cry after that, and it was fairly creepy, so I decided to ask her what it was all about. Well, turns out that guy was her boyfriend and they had just broken up. I made the stupid mistake of asking if she was okay, just trying to be polite while secretly hoping she wouldn't go into detail about it, which of course she unfortunately did. As it so happens, he had repeatedly told her from day one that after a bit of divorce he just wasn't really interested in a monogamous relationship, and that he really just wanted something open. No strings attached, no commitments, and absolutely no expectations. She then confided in me that she did want those things and just went along with them since she could see his potential as a husband from day one, just like she could me. And there went those alarm bells yet again. Anyways, he was apparently pretty serious about wanting an open relationship because he'd actually gone behind her back and signed them up for a swingers weekend a couple of cities over. When she'd found that out, she said no and that she wasn't ready for that yet, but agreed to have sex with a guy that her boyfriend knew while he watched, right after he had just dropped into the conversation how he'd helped a woman down the street move in and there was apparently definitely a spark. And when the day came for her show with the stranger, She backed out at the last minute and he got pissed, called the whole thing off, and went and slept with the woman down the street. They ended up getting into a huge fight, and that's when he broke things off with her for not being honest about what she wanted in the relationship. She then told me, "I just got so nervous thinking about a complete stranger screwing me. I'm just not that type of person, and there's very few guys I would just let do that to me. Present company included, of course." I actually cringed at that last remark, and then reminded her that I was seeing someone for almost a year at that point. A comment that she pretty much ignored. I got the impression at this point that in her head, just because me and Elle hadn't met in person, that meant our relationship was somehow less real. She also told me how they'd slept together a few times since then, but knew that he was only coming around whenever the other girl was busy or didn't want to have sex. She also told me that he'd been doing that to her anytime they worked the same shifts. He would just show up and glare at her until someone called him, and had been doing this for almost a month. I told her that she should really report him to the supervisors, but she decided that she could never do that, so I told her she should find a new job. She told me that she couldn't because at her previous place of employment, a popular national chain sandwich shop, apparently she had stolen from it and only avoided prosecution because she had made restitution, and because of her criminal record, there was really no other place that would hire her. There went that alarm again. Over the next few months, things just got absolutely worse. She would randomly walk up to me at work and then start talking about how we'd be great together, and how she always wanted a boyfriend like me, who was kind, thoughtful, a great listener, tall, handsome, yada yada yada. I would always cut her off with a short, not to mention spoken for, and she would just storm off. Alice would get all excited when we had to work together, and she would always post something along the lines of, "Working with OP today. Oh, how I love this man." And then tag me in the post, delete it before I could see it, but not before Elle did, who would eventually save a screenshot of it and, of course, send it to me. When I confronted Alice with this, she basically blew me off, saying that it really wasn't that big of a deal. I decided to unfriend her and then totally blocked her after this. Still, she would often walk up to me or tell me when we were working together about her favorite sexual positions, and also how much she apparently loves giving blowjobs for absolutely no reason. Like sitting on the couch and watching a movie and just giving you one because she wants to for no reason at all. These were her actual words, ladies and gentlemen. I'm not kidding. Now, I'd been in the Navy prior to this, so the content of these comments didn't really bother me so much, as I'd heard much worse from the mouths of the US Navy sailors. What did bother me though was if someone heard these incredibly one-sided conversations and then said something to Elle, just how much trouble that I'd be in with a woman that I'd grown to deeply care for. Not that there was much of a threat of that actually happening. I always told Elle whatever Alice would say to me, but still, it needed to stop. So I went to my direct supervisor and I asked him to not put me to work with Alice anymore, as there were a lot of issues there. I didn't go into detail as I didn't want her to lose her job, but I did say that I was uncomfortable with working with her. That's when things got really creepy. She then started texting me, and when I asked her how she got my number, she totally ignored the question. I decided to change my number, and a few days later she was texting me at my new number, and I changed it again and again. And again, within a few days, she was sending me messages yet again. I didn't keep the texts, and to this day, I have no idea how she was getting my numbers. Also, her texts were responses to in-person conversations that I had with other people. At one point, a friend and I were working 12-hour shifts, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., and I had said something about how I was just going to order a pizza when I got home and then grab a shower while I waited the 30+ minutes for the delivery guy. I then got a text from her later that night saying she had apparently overheard that I was getting a pizza and suggested that I bring the pizza by her place so we could hang out. And another immediately after saying that when I got to her place, I would have to be naked as she's a naturalist when she's at home, and she expects the same from her guests. Obviously, I ignored the text and blocked the number, only to get another message from her the next day from a different number. This one was a picture message of her in nothing but 3 slices of strategically placed pizza, telling me to pick which topping I'd like to eat first. In another instance, I was texting a friend of mine about heading to the mall that weekend to pick up a birthday present for a mutual friend and setting up a pickup time and such. Later that same day, I got a text from her saying she could give me a lift to the mall as she was going to Victoria's Secret to get some new lingerie, and that she needed someone to help her in and out of the lingerie as she tried it on. I got an email later that weekend that was a series of pictures from her in various states of undressed as she modeled her new lingerie for her camera. That week at work, I requested to be put on the weekend shifts permanently, as she worked the morning weekday shifts, and that would mean I would only have to see her once during the week and not really have to work with her other than that. Alice's response to seeing me less was to start showing up at places I was at. I went to a small party store in town where I could get a hard-to-find flavor of this brand of soda I like, and as I walked up to the register, Alice was suddenly there, just standing in the doorway. I paid for my sodas and then just kind of stood there. I didn't want to call the police and get myself tied up with legal issues since I was still planning to travel to Europe to spend some time with Elle. And I also didn't want to go home as I was afraid she would follow me home and then know where I lived. So I decided to just stand there, kind of just looking at her and not really sure what to do. That's when she suddenly turned around and then just left without saying a word or even purchasing anything. She also showed up one night at my favorite burger place, a little hole-in-the-wall bar, and sat down at my table right across from me, and actually had the gall to ask me if I was going to buy her dinner. I then moved to the bar, where I stayed until the bar closed at 3 a.m., and then some. The barkeep was actually a friend of mine who gave me a lift home. I caught her following me around a major chain superstore late at night, and when I finally shook her and was able to go home, I then got pictures sent to me of her masturbating in the pharmacy department. How she got away with that one, I'll never know. And honestly, I don't want to. Unfortunately, at this point, Elle's mother was diagnosed with final stage colon cancer, and she actually died less than 2 weeks later. Feeling like I really needed to be there for Elle, I got my documentation in order, bought a plane ticket, and put in my 2 weeks notice. I actually saw Alice twice more in my regular spots in the coming weeks as I prepared to depart for a 3-month stay to help Elle with anything she needed. Once outside my bank when I stopped to shift some funds around for my trip, and the other as I was getting some new socks and underwear and the like for the trip. She then walked up to me and actually recommended what she would like to see me wearing, before slithering away like a snake. A couple of weeks later, I was sitting in the airport terminal waiting for my plane, and I got a few texts from her asking if I was ready to man up and give her a couple of orgasms yet. I shook my head and just ignored it. 3 months later, I was back in the States just in time for the 4th of July. I didn't see Alice all summer, nor did I give her much thought. Elle came to visit at the end of September, and in November we actually got married after being together and traveling back and forth for about 3 years. Later that month, my hometown was holding their annual Christmas tree lighting ceremony. Elle had never been to one before and she really wanted to go, so we went. While we're standing there singing Christmas carols, me rather off-key, I then felt these arms wrap around me from behind and then clasp at my waist. Initially thinking it was Elle, I put my hand on hers about the same time that I realized that Elle was standing next to me, so she couldn't be the one wrapped around me, nor were these hands wearing her wedding ring. I pulled the person's hands away, twirled around, coming face to face with who else? It's Alice. She'd spotted me in the crowd and decided to say hi with some guy in tow. Elle turned around and Alice spotted her, and I could just see insanity just flash across her face. I then saw her take the hot cup of cocoa away from the guy with her, and I then pulled Elle slightly behind me as Alice lowered the cup as if to throw it all over Elle. I asked her who her date was, and she just froze and then looked at him, and then quickly said that he wasn't a date, he was just a friend of hers. This seemed like news to him as he got really angry and then stormed away. I watched him go, and when I turned back to Alice, she was sizing up Elle, so I asked Elle if she could get me a cup of that hot cocoa. Elle left, and then Alice asked, So, still dating her, huh? I then responded, no, we're actually married now. Alice froze, looked me dead in the eye, and then recited my address, described the entire layout of my bedroom in extensive detail, and then promised that she would show me what real Americans do to Euro trash, before she then ran off into the dark night. Elle and I stayed at my parents' house the last few days we were there. I called the cops, but nothing ever came of it. What do you know? I also called my former landlord and told him he should be on the lookout for someone trying to break into the empty apartment. At the end of November, we got on a plane bound for Portugal, and I left Alice behind. Me and Elle now have a baby named for Elle's mother. I feel really bad for whoever Alice latches onto next, but I'm really glad that there's an entire ocean between us now. And Alice, if you're out there and you're reading this, please, for the love of God and all that is holy, let's never, and I mean ever, meet again. Hey everyone, thank you for taking the time to listen to today's video. I really hope you enjoyed it. If you have your own personal scary story or experience, be sure to submit them to my website at southerncannibal.com. Stay safe everyone, and remember to always stay hungry.